Welcome to Redefining Real Estate. I'm Rylan.
And I'm Morgan. Expect a mix of education, humor, and authentic conversation as we explore all things real estate.
Let's jump into today's episode.
So this week on my Instagram story, I asked you guys, if you were going to purchase a property, would you rather have a new construction as an investment, or would you rather have a charming old home? I know.
Charming old home, a gross new construction or a charming old home.
Yeah, a gross new construction or a charming old home. And as you can imagine, most of my followers did choose the charming old home as their investment of choice. So today we wanted to talk about what kind of person or lifestyle would make sense for each of these different types of properties and figure out which one would be the right fit for you who's listening. So, Rylan, in your experience, what types of people typically look at new construction when they're thinking about purchasing an investment for rental purposes or even, looking for a home to buy?
Yeah, for sure. So I have two clients at the moment building new construction from the ground up. Their biggest concern was maintenance. They didn't want to have to worry about anything. Obviously, there is some concerns with like getting the home up and running and making sure everything's perfect and all the appliances are functioning properly. But like after that initial startup, they didn't want to have to worry about certain issues with the home or foundation issues right off the bat or whatever it may be. Their biggest concern was just, I want it to be in my price range and I want to be able to just move in immediately and not have to take on a whole bunch of responsibility of whatever maintenance comes with purchasing homes. So that was their biggest thing.
Okay, so they're basically saying like they'd rather pay maybe a little bit more upfront to have reduced risk of other costs in the near future.
Yes, and they were both very adamant on not wanting to do any repairs to the home. So they didn't want to have to say like, walk in, this house is great, but I need to fix this, whatever that may be. They were just wanting to move in, perfect home, perfect life, happy, all that stuff.
Right.
They didn't want to take on any more responsibilities with that. They just wanted a smooth transition.
So are these people typically people that do not want to take on like side projects, or like maybe their lifestyle is where their job or their family takes the priority of their time, and maybe they don't have extra time to use for these like DIY projects or renovation projects that they could potentially do with an older home?
Yes. So one of my clients, he travels a lot. So he's always at the airport going somewhere for business, always doing something. So he doesn't want to have to worry about his home here. He kind of just wants it as like a home base, somewhere to come back to, not necessarily like I'm going to fix it up and make it my own. It's just kind of like this is where I need to sleep and eat, and then I got to go back out there and keep doing what I do. And the other couple, they're a little bit older. They've been renting for a while. They kind of just wanted to do something for themselves and just get a nicer home and then kind of just settle down there. So kind of two different scenarios. But so to kind of answer your question, my first client, he just wanted something like quick, easy, head off, and keep going. And then the other people were kind of just wanting to not take on anything too big, like now. Just because that's where they're at in their life. So they weren't really wanting to fix anything up.
Right. And I think something important that you mentioned is that they've been renting for a while and they're older.
Yes.
So typically that type of person is not going to want, like if they've been renting for years, they're not going to want to have to deal with projects that they aren't prepared for because they're already used to having a landlord fix all of those types of issues, right?
Yes. Yeah. And that was their big thing. We were like sitting down over here at the table up front, and they were like, we're just at a point where we're not willing to like hire contractors and get people out here to make big repairs and remove this wall to open the space. They're just really concerned with purchasing a home that they liked, and that's what we ended up doing. So that was their experience with that.
Yes, that is helpful. And I think from what I'm hearing from you and what I know from my personal experiences with clients is that usually when you're talking about new construction versus an older home, especially in the entry-level price range, a lot of times what consideration needs to happen is like, do you have more time or do you want to spend more money? Right? So do you have more time to worry about fixing something up or planning a renovation or doing the renovation, where yes, you may end up spending more money than you would with a new construction, but you're going to spend more like mental time actually figuring out what needs to be done, versus new construction, you don't have to deal with all of that. Like
Yes.
there is no like time really involved in making those decisions. It's
Right.
more so like the upfront cost of the property.
Yeah, for sure. They're definitely paying a bit more like per square foot if you break down the cost of it, but they're definitely okay with it because it meets their needs. You know,
Right.
they went into it understanding that they may pay a little bit more, but they're going to get something that they really want, and it's going to be exactly how they want it. And plus, too, they are all excited about the warranties as well that come with the home. So they're also not super worried about anything breaking because they know that those warranties do exist and they have access to them. So.
Right. And by the way, if you are interested in learning more about new construction and the pros and cons of that whole process, we did do a separate episode on new construction just a couple of weeks ago. So go check that out. But when it comes to a charming old home,
The beautiful, charming, gorgeous old homes.
yes, I know that I have been a victim of the charming old home because
Yes.
that's basically all that I own is the charming old home. I don't love a cookie cutter neighborhood. I want something
sure.
unique that
Yeah.
nobody else has.
Yeah.
Which comes with its own territory of having problems that nobody else has.
You know, you get a little bit of both.
Yes. So I know for me personally, I own homes that are pier and beam. They were built in the 1930s. You know, they're like really old. They're the really old ones.
Yes.
But we have a large amount of 1980s, 1990s homes as well, 1970s homes here in the area. And in your experience, do clients tend to gravitate towards those more, or like, I think the issue is just like location in our area because there's not a lot of options for new construction close
Right.
to the things people want to be next to.
Yeah, for me, a lot of people are kind of in between. They're not like in the older or the brand new. It's kind of between like, I guess 2010 and 2018, which I guess is new, but not necessarily like 2024 new. But that's kind of been my like sweet spot, I feel like, with clients. Is that the same for you?
I think that in general, I either have a client that says, I don't want anything older than 10 years old because they're concerned about age of the HVAC, age of the roof, age of all these different large systems. Or I have people that are like, I don't care about any of that. I want something that looks cute in a location that I want it. Like I want something nice in this location.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that's something that buyers in this market also have to consider is, yes, there are great locations of new construction neighborhoods, but typically they're going to be further out because nobody's building new construction in the middle of town. Like
Right.
they're not building it right next to campus.
Yeah, exactly.
So you can't have the best of both worlds. You really have to choose.
Yes.
And with a lot of the complexes that are newer, closer to campus for like student investment purposes, like they're over 10 years old at this point. So you're dealing with a lot of the same issues that you would
Yes.
be looking at if you looked at an older property.
Yeah, for sure.
But what are some of the considerations that you've dealt with or talked to clients about when looking at older properties? Is there anything specifically?
I would say the big three things, like just foundation, roof, and HVAC. I mean, I think that's pretty standard with any home you're looking at,
Right.
but I really try and hit on that a lot more when it comes to older homes, just because you don't know what's going on. For example, my HVAC unit at my house was pretty much original. It was like one of the York or something like that. And it was well over like 15, 20 years old, and it was still kicking for a long time. And it finally started showing some signs of not being able to keep up with the temperature. But I mean, anyone who was, say my house was for sale, anyone that would be looking at it would be like terrified of that, you know. And but it lasted forever, and
Yeah.
we finally ended up replacing it, but it's a different story. So yeah, I would just say that's definitely something I really try and hit on. There's a lot of other things in there, but those are the main three.
I would agree that I typically do those same three, but with foundations specifically, and houses built in the 60s through the 80s, I mean, there's going to be foundation shifting in our area. That's completely normal based on the soil we have, and also the fact that we go from extreme droughts to extreme rainy
Seasons.
years and
Yeah.
seasons. So that's something that I've had to coach my clients a lot with, is like, it's normal to see some, you know, cracks on the drywall seams. That's
Yeah.
normal. If we're seeing diagonal lines coming off of all of the doorways and all of the windows, then yes, we may have a more significant problem.
Right.
But also, a lot of times, some foundation movement is not significant enough to where you can't live in the home.
Right.
So the big things to look out for is if there is foundation movement, it could potentially, crack a pipe that's in the foundation. And so you need to look at the exterior and look at the interior walls in those areas to make sure that if there is any movement going on, that if it's significant, you have that checked out by a professional, right?
For sure.
But at the same time, it's just kind of part of life here in our market.
If someone were to walk up to you and ask hey, I don't know what to do, how do I make a decision between new construction or an older home? What would be your initial answer?
So if they are, it's hard to make a decision,
Yes.
right? Okay, that's hard to make a decision. But if they are, looking at their first home, I think it just, like we talked about earlier, boils down to their lifestyle.
Yeah.
Are they someone who wants to invest more upfront and then not have to deal with any issues down the line, and live maybe a little bit further out, but have such a busy lifestyle that they literally do not have the time to worry about, home issues or home projects?
Right.
Or are they the type that want something unique? They want something different than everyone else. They're willing to put in additional time and money to fix up things later down the line. And maybe they don't want such a big initial investment, and they're
Yeah.
willing to invest in it more over time.
Right.
Which I think is the big thing. Are they willing to take more risk?
Yeah.
Is kind of the overall idea. Because if you are someone who is willing to take more risk, I think you're more comfortable with taking on an older home, regardless of the age, as long as, some of the big systems have been addressed somewhat recently, versus someone who's just not in the mindset to take any sort of risk on their living situation, either because financially they cannot afford to, or just because of time they can't afford to.
Yeah.
So that's what I would say is the biggest deciding factor is let's look at your lifestyle and what's really important to you and figure out where you might fall within those two buckets.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I mean, whenever you're looking at an older home, it's almost fun to walk in and just imagine all the possibilities, because you're looking at one thing, but you could turn it into something completely your own.
Right.
There's a lot of versatility in what you could do with, obviously more money, but that's kind of the goal, is to buy it a little bit less than what you typically would for new construction, and then put money into it to where you can make it your own and all unique and all that. I definitely think that there's a lot of cool projects out there. There are some homes for sale that have gone through that exact process.
Right.
And they're definitely super cool and unique, without a doubt.
Yeah, I think something that we're starting to see in our area as we get more students coming in and just more growth in general is that people are starting to do really good renovation projects on
Yes.
older homes.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of these older home neighborhoods in the past have just been tenant occupied
Right.
rentals. And then some people living in them long term. I think we're starting to see a lot of full renovation projects that would really have these older homes compete with the new construction.
For sure.
And that is something I'm very excited about seeing because
sure.
we haven't really had that.
Yeah, that house that I think you just closed on recently, I mean, the cabinets were all brand new. Kitchen was amazing. That was a really cool home. And I never would have guessed that whenever I was pulling up to it and was walking inside. You walk in, it's just immaculate.
Yeah.
And it was done right too. It wasn't just cheaped out where someone just tried to cover things up. They definitely took their time to make it unique, make it their own, and I definitely think it was a good job.
Yeah, it definitely gave Airbnb vibes. I feel like
For
that's
sure, the furniture. It was the furniture.
It was the furniture. Yeah, it was definitely you could tell they put a lot of thought into it, but at the same time, it was so unique that it still appealed to people who would maybe want to rent, which I think is something else to consider if someone is purchasing a property to eventually turn into a rental, is how are tenants going to perceive this property?
Yeah.
You're going to be looking for tenants that are basically in the same mindset as you. Do they like something new and shiny and less maintenance, ideally? Or are they open to being maybe in a better location, but having to deal with the risk of an older property where some things might break unexpectedly and they might have to deal with, you trying to fix that.
Yeah, for sure. That's definitely a good point. I feel like newer construction homes, you can definitely rent them for more just because they're nicer per se, but you're also dealing with a lot more costs owning the new construction. So I feel like when you really break down the numbers, obviously I don't own either or and have tenants, but I feel like it'd be pretty close. But yeah, that would definitely be something to consider when you're looking into either or of those, if that's what your goal is to have
Right.
tenants.
Right. I think that is the whole thing, right? You're gonna spend more upfront, but you're gonna have less risk of paying for other things down the line.
Yeah. There was some people in a neighborhood that had reached out to me at one point. They were looking to sell their home, and it was in kind of what some people would call a cookie cutter neighborhood, and they have owned it for only like 2.5, 3 years maybe, and they basically had like zero equity in the home just because it was so soon. But they had to move. Their job took them somewhere else in the state. I forgot where they told me, but it was a while ago. And they just had like zero equity built in the home, so they didn't really know what to do because they were definitely going to be like negative, and they ended up just leasing it. I don't know how that's going for them, but they did end up leasing it for a pretty good amount, and they were happy. So, I mean, that's definitely an option if you're looking to sell a new construction home quick. But I also think too, in such a short time frame of owning the home, it's kind of like a long-term thing for equity. You know,
Yes.
It's not like you're going to build 50K in 2 years, right?
Right. And especially with new construction, people don't think about this because life happens and
Right.
things aren't always what you expect them to be. But
Right.
you buy a new construction home and maybe you're the first person, or maybe you're in the first or second phase of construction of the entire subdivision. And then you don't realize when you may need to sell your home in 2 or 3 years, they're still building a new phase. So now
Right.
you're in the same exact subdivision as this new construction, and they're offering builder incentives.
Yes.
They're offering, to pay closing costs, and now you're competing directly with a brand new home with all these warranties. And so that's something that I do find a lot. I've had clients that I've helped sell their properties in
Okay,
that
yeah.
same position, and it is very, very difficult. You have to be very creative and try to make your house stand out marketing wise when it comes to a
Right.
situation like that.
Yeah, and it's hard too because you're typically like pretty much at the same price point too.
Yeah.
And it's like how.
Yeah, when you add on the fees of, closing costs and commissions and everything, it ends up
Yeah.
being like around the same as what a new house would sell for, and that's what makes it very difficult.
Yeah, without a doubt, and that's definitely something I feel like is looked over because their plan was to be in Bryan-College Station for a long time. Like they were not planning on moving, but they had to. Like that's where his job was taking him, and then his wife was a teacher of some sort. But yeah, they were definitely pretty like frustrated and didn't really know what to do. But they ended up just leasing it themselves off of like Zillow or something.
Right.
So they're like, yeah, like we're good. I think we got it figured out, and if we do plan on selling it later down the road, like we'll let you know. So we'll see how it goes. But
Right.
as of now, they were able to figure their situation out.
Yeah, I actually talked to a client recently who's kind of in that same position. They bought in 2021,
Okay.
so like in the height of all the craziness. They have a super low interest rate, but they just installed a pool.
Okay.
And so, it's been 3 years, and over 3 years, yes, their property has increased significantly, but when you're adding in a pool and all these other things considered,
Yeah.
they are looking to make a move, but looking at the numbers, not sure if it makes sense. And when you're looking at leasing it, they're in a price range where, if you're paying over $3,000 a month in rent, you might as well go buy a new home.
Yeah. for
So that's something they're having to consider. But I think when it comes down to it, it just all depends on the lifestyle and the financial situation of each individual person. So if you are listening to this episode and you're wondering which might be the best fit for you, definitely feel free to reach out to us on social media. Our links are down below in the description. And we look forward to tuning in again next week when we talk about, what was your poll?
It was the one that won was avoiding home buying mistakes.
Avoiding home buying mistakes. So if you have any questions that you want us to discuss, hit us up on Instagram, and we will see y'all next week.
Thanks for hanging out with us today. We hope you found something useful or at least had a good time listening.
Yeah, if you enjoy this episode, feel free to subscribe or share it with someone who might enjoy this content.
And if you have any questions or topics you want us to cover, reach out to us on Instagram. Everything will be linked below for you.